Welcome to the Dr. Gospel channel of Environmental Studies. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a really critical explainer designed specifically for you, our future civil servants. We're going to bridge the gap between fundamental global ecology and urgent local conservation. Think of this as your ultimate masterclass, an essential stepping stone not just for your exams, but for your future careers in policymaking. Let's get right into it. Okay, here is our syllabus to strategy roadmap for today. We'll be covering 6 core areas: ecology and ecosystem basics, energy flow, niches and succession, the biodiversity crisis, extinction threats, and finally, conservation efforts. It's a journey from macro foundations all the way down to micro actions. Section 1, Ecology and Ecosystem Basics, the foundation of life. Let's set the stage. Now, definitely note this down for your exams. The term environment actually comes from the French word environs, which just means your physical surroundings, the living, biotic, and non-living abiotic stuff around you. But ecology is a whole different ballgame. Coined by German biologist Ernst Haeckel back in 1866, from the Greek words oikos, meaning home, and logos, meaning study, ecology is the actual scientific discipline analyzing the interactions within those surroundings. So it's not just the stage itself, it's the complex play happening right there on the stage. As we look at these interactions, we have to categorize our stages. And this is a really critical distinction for your tests. Natural ecosystems, like wild forests, deserts, and oceans, develop without any human help. They are entirely self-sustaining. On the flip side, artificial ecosystems, think crop fields or aquariums, are entirely human-managed. And because we heavily curate them, they usually possess significantly less biodiversity than their wild, natural counterparts. And notice the difference here between an ecosystem and a biome. A biome is this massive, much broader natural region. Look closely at how climate, specifically your temperature and rainfall, actually dictates the type of biome. A desert biome exists because of super low rainfall, right? Whereas a tropical rainforest absolutely relies on heavy rain and warm temperatures. Within one of these giant biomes, you can literally have thousands of smaller, distinct ecosystems. Moving on to Section 2. Energy flow and food webs, the engine of biodiversity. So to really grasp a food web, you absolutely must remember the difference between a habitat and a niche. A habitat is basically just an address, a physical location like a frog living in a pond. But a niche? A niche is the organism's functional role or its specific job in that ecosystem. It's what that frog eats, like insects, and what eats the frog, like snakes. It is how it interacts with the whole system. Okay, time for a quick check to test your understanding. Can 2 different species occupy the exact same niche in an ecosystem for a long time? Think about it for a second. The answer is absolutely not. According to Gauss's principle, one species will inevitably outcompete the other for those specific resources. Competition is a fundamental driving force of ecological balance. And because species fill all these different niches, energy flows through multiple interconnected pathways in a food web. It all kicks off at the first trophic level with our producers, who use photosynthesis or chemosynthesis to literally make food. Then that energy moves on to primary consumers, our herbivores, up to secondary consumers, the carnivores, and all the way up to the top, the tertiary consumers, or apex predators. Finally, the cleanup crew, decomposers like bacteria and fungi, break down the dead material, recycling those vital nutrients right back into the soil. And this brilliantly illustrates Raymond Lindemann's 10% law from 1942. When energy transfers from one trophic level to the next, say from a tasty plant to a rabbit, only 10% of that energy actually gets passed on. Imagine eating 10 burgers but only getting the energy of 1. That's wild, right? The remaining 90% is mostly lost as heat. This is exactly why the pyramid of energy is always upright. You need a massive base of producers to support the very few top predators sitting way up at the peak. All right, Section 3, Niches, Succession, and Evolution, Ecosystems in Motion. Ecosystems are never static, so let's see how this builds chronologically through ecological succession. Primary succession starts painfully slow on landscapes with absolutely zero life, like bare rock or a fresh lava flow. It relies heavily on pioneer species, like lichens, to slowly break down the rock and form soil over centuries. Secondary succession, however, rebounds way faster. It happens after major disturbances like forest fires or floods. Because the nutrient-rich soil is already there, shrubs and eventually a climax community of large trees can return surprisingly fast. Now, on a global scale, ecosystems also shift over millions of years. Brilliant scientists like Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace observed that continental drift caused geographic isolation. Because the landmass is physically separated, species evolved on entirely distinct paths. This is what gave us unique, endemic species in different biogeographic realms. The Wallace Line is a perfect example of this. It marks a really stark evolutionary boundary separating Asian and Australian flora and fauna. This brings us to Section 4, the Global Biodiversity Crisis, Threats at Home and Abroad. As a dedicated scientist in this field, I have to tell you, the situation is incredibly urgent. Though the term was used earlier by R.F. Dassman, biodiversity was widely popularized by the amazing biologist Edward O. Wilson back in 1985. We even celebrate World Biodiversity Day on May 22nd to honor this incredible variation of life. But the most direct, devastating sign of our current crisis is the absolutely terrifying rate at which species are becoming extinct due to human actions. We're talking about rates vastly faster than the natural baseline. The really crucial point here is understanding the direct link between global trends and local impacts. Global climate change, driven by greenhouse gas emissions, is causing rising temperatures and highly erratic rainfall. Locally, this directly exacerbates ecosystem collapse. Just look at Mizoram. Shifting Zoom cultivation and commercial logging caused severe deforestation. When you combine that weakened, deforested soil with the erratic monsoon rainfall triggered by global climate change, the tragic result is a huge increase in devastating, deadly landslides. It's all connected. Section 5. Assessing Extinction Threats. Data-driven conservation. A major tool we use here is Population Viability Analysis, or PVA. This scientific method estimates long-term survival risks by looking at current population size, birth and death rates, and environmental threats. It's absolutely essential data when we're desperately trying to save endangered species like the tiger, whose numbers are critically low. We use it to predict if they can survive, or if they're going to face the exact same fate as the dinosaurs. Okay, exam key alert for you all. The IUCN Red Data Book is the definitive global tool for this. It carefully catalogs endangered, threatened, and rare species of plants, animals, and fungi. Being endangered means their populations are critically low, but they do still exist, and we can still protect them. Because once they go extinct, they are gone forever. The Red Data Book is literally our final alarm bell before that permanent threshold is crossed. Which leads us perfectly into Section 6, Conservation Efforts and Hotspots, our final defense. The concept of a biodiversity hotspot was first proposed by Norman Myers. Globally, there are 36 recognized hotspots. Now, to qualify, a region has to be incredibly rich in endemic plant species, meaning at least 0.5% of the world's total, but it must have already suffered a massive 70% loss of its original vegetation. India, proudly but also precariously, hosts 4 of these vital global hotspots: the Himalaya, Indo-Burma, Western Ghats, and Sunderland. And how do we actively protect them? Through protected areas like national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. 617. That is the total number of protected areas in India. However, this contrasts super sharply with just 10 protected areas currently in Mizoram. This stark difference really underscores the urgent need to expand our conservation efforts at the local and state levels so we can effectively match and support these broader global protection strategies. Which brings us to the ultimate question for this explainer. As future civil servants, armed with an understanding of everything from the 10% law of energy transfer to the harsh realities of local deforestation, how will you apply these foundational ecological laws? How will you draft the policies that ensure the survival of a remaining biodiversity? Think deeply on that, because the future of our ecosystems rests on those decisions. Until then, stay productive, review these mechanisms closely, and prepare to be the leaders our ecosystems so desperately need.